And so I will introduce the moderator, Kathryna, and then I will hand over to you to introduce your panelists briefly. Kathryna Baptiste Assee is an attorney at law with over 25 years experience in various areas, including corporate, commercial, compliance, and employment law, and has held senior executive management roles in both public and private sector entities. At the moment, Kathryna is the Group General Counsel of Angostura Limited. Prior to joining Angostura, she served as manager and legal and corporate secretary for TCL, now CIMEX, and she previously held the position of legal manager, company secretary at the National Petroleum Marketing Company of Trinidad and Tobago. As well as being an attorney at law, she holds an executive MBA with distinction from the Lockjack Global School of Business, where she graduated as a valedictorian. She has tutored at the Heward Law School and has presented at several seminars on corporate governance. Kathryna is a member of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and I would say proudly a member of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. In 2023, last year, she was appointed as director of the Latin American and Caribbean Council Association. Kathryna, it is my pleasure to hand over this panel to you for this evening, our third and final for Day 2 of Governance Week 2024.
Thank you so much, Kamala. I'm indeed honored to moderate this very important discussion with such an esteemed panel. I want to applaud the CCGI and Kamala for taking such a holistic approach to corporate governance. It's not just about the technical side, but also about the softer skills, because at the end of the day, it's the people who really would lead organizations, and the people are in charge of the governance and ensuring that proper governance is installed and executed. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel. The full bios are in your agenda, but I will just quickly introduce Lara Quentrall-Thomas. Lara is well known for her business networking skills and commitment to philanthropy. Lara is the founder and chairman of Regency Recruitment and Resources Limited, Trinidad and Tobago. She's a leading HR and recruitment services practitioner with more than 30 years experience. Her role as founder and chairman of Regency includes strategic planning, crafting HR service proposals and contracts, negotiating client master service agreements, and curating and facilitating training programs for corporate customers in a range of topics, including performance management, business etiquette, interviewing skills, and professional networking. Also on our panel is Mr. Asif Jasat. Asif is the project and portfolio manager at Nestle Canada, responsible for corporate strategy transformation, and is responsible for corporate strategy transformation and governance in Trinidad, I believe. His journey through the corporate landscape is a testament to his unwavering dedication to excellence and innovation. Residing in Toronto, Ontario, Asif has honed his expertise over 17 plus years in strategic planning, organizational transformation, and program management, leaving an indelible mark across North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Last but not least, we have Mr. John Edghill. John is a seasoned public finance and business executive with extensive experience in governance within Guyana's economic landscape. Currently, he serves as the Senior Director of Investment at the Guyana Office for Investment, where he brings a wealth of expertise in export promotion and investment facilitation. In this role, John is responsible for implementing strategies to promote Guyana as an attractive investment destination and tailoring programs that open up new markets for Guyanese products and services. His leadership in these areas underscores his commitment to enhancing Guyana's economic growth through strategic investment initiatives. So, our topic today is development and personal growth for executives. And I'm going to invite Lara to make some opening comments for about 10 minutes maximum and start us off today. Lara.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathryna, and good evening, everyone. Thanks again to the CCGI for inviting me to be part of this very important discussion. And congratulations on an excellent governance week so far. So when we think about development and personal growth for executives, I think it's really a very important topic, as you said, because, you know, I'm a big fan of RuPaul, And RuPaul says, if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love anybody else? And I think that's fundamentally what we need to be talking about tonight. When we think about our executives and our leaders, even ourselves, we cannot give to others if we are not fully rejuvenated and strong and ready and not exhausted and drawn out and tired all the time. And so I wanted to focus on 3 key areas tonight. I know there's lots of different areas that you can think about when you think about personal development, executive development. But I wanted to focus on 3. The first one is work-life balance. And I know that title is a bit misleading because actually work is part of life. But I know we're familiar with it. So I thought I would start with that because, as I say, I don't think you can take care of others, grow your business, be a thought leader if you're exhausted. And I know during COVID, it was very interesting as a business owner myself, and I'm sure a lot of the participants will recognize this, that we spent a lot of time thinking about the wellness of our staff, and nobody was really talking about the wellness of our leaders. And I think that all of us felt great fatigue coming through this. It was, of course, a time of great upheaval and a very dynamic, uncertain environment to run a business in. And you're so busy taking care of other people that you sometimes neglect to take care of yourself. And I think that's particularly true of women, if I may say so. So let's talk first about work-life balance and some of the things that leaders and executives can do in this space. So this is one of the 3 areas that I wanted to sort of open with this evening. The first is, of course, time and task management, being able to use technology, use scheduling and other tools to prioritize your tasks and manage time effectively. There's a lot of conversation now about the 4-day work week, which I personally love the idea. But, I think it's absolutely essential that executives aren't working, 20-hour days anymore. Those days are behind us. We have the technology to manage and prioritize our tasks in a way that gives us the time to rest and rejuvenate. We must invest in our own physical and mental well-being and health through exercise, relaxation, and other techniques. And of course, you have to sometimes schedule, but put in your calendar time for your family, your outside interests, whether it's sport or nature or gardening or religious activities, whatever it might be, because it's absolutely essential for us to maintain our health and our well-being if we're to be effective. So some of the strategies that executives can think about is setting boundaries. And really this starts with your working hours. And I'm sure many of you have read about companies, and I believe France is a real leader in this area, where employees will not respond to emails after 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And I certainly don't expect my staff to. When we finish at 4:30, we're finishing at 4:30. Now, I know in some industries that's not always possible, but where it is possible to set those boundaries to protect your personal time, as a leader, you need to set the example by doing it yourself and, of course, make sure it's being done for others. Using the tools that are available to you in terms of task management, online scheduling, and even scheduling breaks, scheduling time off the computer, away from your phone. I have this amazing smartwatch that every half an hour I get a buzz and it says, get up, move. It's reminding me that I've been sat on my computer for too long. We have to take these things seriously because they can lead to significant health issues. Learn to say no. This was a hard one for me. I'm somebody who, when I was building my business, said yes to everything. I've known Camera a long time, and she knows I was in everything. I was on every board and I was all over the place. I am now, as an older, wiser person, learning to say no because I want to prioritize my mental health. So before I take on any new commitment, I really have to assess whether it's aligned with my goals for my career, my priorities for my life. So I'm not just going to say yes to everything anymore. Of course, using technology to enable us to do things like remote work, to have this wonderful conversation with colleagues from around the hemisphere. But I think technology is such an incredible tool to help us manage our time more effectively. So we can automate some of our routine tasks. We can schedule things in a way that give us time and space. So definitely it's important to invest in technology that allows you the balance you need. In your organizations, promote a healthy culture, lead by example, as I said, encourage time off. At Regency, we have mental health days. My staff are allowed to take a mental health day. They get one every 2 months. And it's essentially, in addition to their vacation and the 42 public holidays that we have here in Trinidad, they are allowed to just tell me the day before, I'm not coming in tomorrow. They don't have to explain it. I don't need to know what you're doing. You just need a day. Maybe you're going to spend the day in bed. Maybe you're going to go to Maracas. I don't need to know. But if you're exhausted and you just need a day, then we give that to you. And that has been had a huge impact on the productivity of my staff, but also our staff retention. So by building these cultures of healthy balance, setting boundaries for yourself and your team, you actually increase your staff retention and their productivity. In fact, even before COVID, we were doing 980 here at Regency. Massive impact on our staff. So I certainly would encourage that. Setting goals for yourself, for your own personal development, personal time, and then something that Nigel spoke about earlier, asking for help. If you need help, whether it's with your mental wellness, I was at a session this morning talking about mental health and the challenges that a lot of men are facing in the world, where men traditionally don't ask for help. They see it as a sign of weakness. I know we are having these conversations more and more, but it's really important as a leader that, you don't feel that it's a sign of weakness if you're asking for help. And of course, encourage your staff. So you're leading by example through your own balance of life and work. The second thing I wanted to recommend for professional development, and this is something that I am particularly passionate about, is networking. I interview a lot of people. That's my job. And it always amazes me how many professionals are not networking in their own discipline, in their own vocation, not supporting their professional association. And in Trinidad, we have a professional association for everything. I'm sure many other countries in the Caribbean, it's the same. So, it is absolutely essential for professionals, leaders, executives to be involved in the development of their own profession. You heard earlier that Kathryna's in the Law Association. I've been very involved in the HR Association for many, many years since I started Regency. And what people don't understand is that being in a network, whether it's within your own discipline, within your own industry, even in diverse BSOs like the Chambers of Commerce or the TTCSI or even CCGI as a form of networking, it gives you access to opportunities. So if you're thinking about career development, where can I go next? You often find yourself talking to people who may be on a path that you'd like to follow, you are inspired by. So you can learn about opportunities. Of course, you get up to date on industry trends. You find out what's happening in your sector. You get a lot of diverse perspectives. You can find mentors. You can find persons in your industry that can help you solve problems. There's a great deal of talent you can acquire as well for your own organization. So if you're looking for senior level people in your industry, in your sector, then networking is one of the great ways. Of course, you can also call Regency recruitment, but through your network as well is a great way to source talent. It's very important, I think, for executives to build their brand as thought leaders, as influencers. And so, again, thinking about the long term, thinking about maybe when you retire, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a consultant? Maybe you want to write a book or, these sorts of things. You're building towards that through your networking. You're becoming known as a thought leader and somebody that gets invited to speak at lovely panels like this. And the other thing that's very important about networking is, and I found this very interesting because I hadn't thought about this before, that it's a great place if your company or you going through a crisis to seek help and advice. We've seen a lot of organizations go through major crises in the last 20 or so years. Of course, we now see them on social media. And so helping each other in your industry, in your sector, and networking is not just about taking, it's also about giving to others, reaching out to others. How can I help? How can we support you? And then you get that back when it's your time of crisis. So there's really so many benefits for networking. So first one, balance, setting boundaries. Second one, networking. And then my third recommendation for executive development is cultural competence. And this is really where you are building a workplace that is inclusive. We've talked a lot about DEI and B and R in the last few years, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and respect. But we have a commitment to our organizations, indeed to our industries and our country, I think, to build workplaces where people feel safe and included, where you get the most out of people when they feel safe. I think that's a given. So you need to build into your organizational training schedule things like cultural awareness, focusing on diversity. And I'm not just talking about gender or ethnicity or even religious diversity. It goes so much deeper than that. We don't have a lot of time this evening to talk about it, but I would encourage you to start to work with your HR team and build a lot of information into your training programs around cultural competency and diversity. Obviously, go on global assignments. It's so lovely to see Asif here today, a Trinidadian working in Canada. You know, Trinis go all over the world to work. And that's a great way to build your brand, but also to build your cultural competencies, to work with professionals from other nations, bring them into your organization, have them on your boards, so that you really do build that cultural competency, that international perspective, which is so important, even for small companies like mine here in little Trinidad and Tobago. It's about encouraging open communication. It's about building a workplace where people of all different backgrounds feel safe and feel included. And this is where you, again, lead by example. So you demonstrate this in your actions, in your decision making. You build teams that are multicultural and multi-generational, multi-ethnic, whatever it is, to show your employees that you are somebody who's committed to diversity and inclusion. And then, of course, you need to regularly assess the success or the impact of your programs to make sure they're having the desired results. So in summary, my 3 key recommendations for professionals. Number 1 is always about balance, making sure you take care of yourself first. Secondly, networking. You have to support your own vocation and discipline. And thirdly, is to become an international professional. Even sitting right here at your desk online, make sure you know what's happening in the world and you're building an inclusive and safe workplace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lara, for those very insightful recommendations. I will now invite Asif Jasat to give his contributions.
Thank you, Kathryna, and very, very insightful, pleasant points and insights by Lara. I think it gives a good segue into some of the discussion points I would like to share, and probably I will just skip where there's overlap in terms of the points on my end, right? But I just like to begin by sharing, ongoing research conducted by, various institutes, right, indicate that by 2030, right, it is estimated that over 375 million workers worldwide will need to switch their occupational categories due to automation and technological advancement. So for today, in terms of upskilling and executive development, my focus of the discussion today will be on the role technology is playing, right? And the need to embrace technology and how executives can upskill, right? To bring about some of the work-life balances that were mentioned earlier. So with the era of technology, the future of work has changed, has continued to change, and is reshaping the business landscape in a very profound way, right? The development paths of executives are changing daily, right? How we learn, who we learn with, how programs are delivered have been revolutionized, and today is an example of that. Technology, is a driving force behind every industry revolution. The way we work, the way we communicate, the way we innovate. We all know the exploits in AI, machine learning, automation, data analytics, and the significance of technology cannot be overstated in any industry. Now, technology has allowed for us to gain efficiency and productivity in the workplace. It has also created new opportunities, right? It has also presented new challenges, right, that we need to pay attention to. So how do executives navigate, right, through this landscape? First and foremost, I would like to recommend the adoption or embracing of digital transformation and innovation, right? In addition to bringing the work-life balance, the mental wellness aspects of it, which was highlighted earlier, emerging technologies and the potential impacts on industries and the way they do business is astronomical. As such, executives and their employees, right, needs to continue to upskill in area of data analytics, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, innovation. The way we do business is evolving and transforming every single day. Now, it was mentioned earlier about the virtual work environment, and we saw what COVID did in terms of us accelerating towards remote work and the work-life balance it brought. So again, I would just like to adopt that theme as well in terms of executives more and more leaning towards the remote ways of working and bringing that new paradigm shift in the workplace. Now, we accept that the culture within the Caribbean is still evolving, right? And there are certain infrastructure, both in terms of home as well as network infrastructure that is required. But certainly from a family perspective, I mean, I value from that environment, right, in terms of what values it brings to your work-life balance, spending time with the family, ability to drop off and pick up kids from school and other social activities, certainly enriches your overall quality of life. And the virtual work environment brings that opportunity. The second point I want to speak on is the whole agility and adaptability of executives. Now, the pace of technology, again, is demanding executives to be agile and adaptive. Now, agile and adaptive, yes, and there are tools and techniques, but that mindset shift, right? The mindset shift in terms of ways of working, how organizations are designed. Organizations are moving from pure profit motives to more working towards a common purpose, sustainability, and that has to transcend across our culture, right? So that agility, embracing uncertainty, and cultivating a growth mindset are essential in this era and a rapid change. And I just like to pause and for us to reflect on the new employee, right? As the generational shift has occurred across all cultures, all industries, and people are more technology savvy. The new employee, right, is demanding more of the employer as well. That work-life balance, that flexibility, that agility, and how prepared are the workspaces to attract one and retain that level of competence within their respective industries. So while technology is transforming the workplace, it is also for us not to overlook the importance of EI. I know I spoke about AI earlier, right? But EI in terms of emotional intelligence and empathy. My colleague earlier spoke about the whole issue of mental wellness. Again, because we are technology prone, technology driven, executive must also have a stronger focus now and be on self-awareness, practicing more servant leadership in this technology driven world. How can you still get the best of your employees through the remote environment? While we embrace technology and we embrace the remote ways of working, we do appreciate that it does bring challenges of limiting human interaction. the coffee table chats, right? Us working remotely means that our calendars are blocked most of the day because of meetings, small conversations, connect points, one-on-one, etc., right? When are we making time to connect with an employee beyond the workspace, right? Beyond a deliverable, beyond the task, and ensuring that their needs and concerns are taken care of, and you understand some of their challenges beyond the workspace. And if you are to develop that level of relationship with them and ensuring that employees' concerns are adhered to, again, it has a tremendous impact on retaining. And again, we continue to transform in that digital workspace, but continue to focus on empathy and interpersonal skills. So the rapid pace of technology and advancement has certainly, becoming, updated on a daily basis, right? The need for change is evolving every day. So organizations do have to prioritize continuous learning, staying abreast of the new skills that is required within the industry. Now, technology and the future of work and the importance of executives to upskill is critical, right? Today's business landscape cannot be ignored in the context of digital transformation, new leadership within the remote space, and that itself, leading within a remote space, requires more practicing of your soft skills, right? Cultivating agility, adaptability, nurturing emotional intelligence, and how do you prioritize continual learning so that we can unlock the true potential from our employees. So, in summary, for me, from a technology perspective and executive development, I think we should place a stronger focus on learning the tools and how they can alleviate some of the pain and bring efficiency. And together, how can we navigate this ever-changing landscape to drive personal growth, both in terms of executives, as well as embracing technology to drive efficiency in terms of the future of work, how we work, where we work from, and what times we work. So in summary, these are my key points, right? Firstly, the importance of technology in the evolving digital landscape and innovation, remote work, agility and adaptability, and lastly, the continual importance of emotional intelligence and empathy in the workplace. So I'll pause here, and then I guess we'll have the opportunity to engage through the Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Asif, for those insightful comments and recommendations, a very futuristic approach. I now invite John to give his contributions.
Thank you, and a pleasant evening to each and every one of you. I think sometimes I'm always given the hard task of having to speak last, especially having some very eloquent and brilliant minds speak before me. But I first of all want to commend the organizers of this particular program, Kamala and all the others, Siavia one as well. It's very pertinent issues and very important topics that we are endeavoring to discuss today. And I hope that I can bring some additional clarity and some additional insights that might be of great use and of great value. So, of course, we're talking today about development and personal growth for executives. And I would have done some of my own introspection in preparation for this particular engagement today. And in doing so, it actually led me to realize that my PMP certification was almost due. So the PMP certification is a 3-year type of renewal process that you have to go through with professional development units, and every 3 years you have to complete 60 units. So when I should say thank you to the organizers for helping me realize that I needed to do some introspection on what were my trajectory of my own personal and professional development. But the PMP is where we can probably spin off and have some discussion going forward. Looking at professional and personal development, the first thing that I would always say to anyone is goal setting is the most ideal. It's a very simplistic issue. I think everyone knows what I mean immediately when I say goal setting, but it's something most times not practiced. And I think most of what the two presenters before me have alluded to are very clear issues, but many times we need the reinforcement. But most persons as executives, many times we don't begin with the end in mind. And for us to enter any journey, as we go into our vehicles, we don't turn on the engine and just start driving without knowing where we're going. So similarly, as we steer our own lives and as we steer our own ships, we need to know what is that final destination. But there are sometimes, just as driving a car or just as steering a ship, you need to make several trips before you get to the final destination. And this is very similar to your personal growth and your personal development. There is no one event or forum that you will be able to ever go to and amass all of the knowledge and all of the skills and all of the capacity needed to be able to execute everything you need to do in life and become success, as we like to put. So this is really a journey that you have to continuously take. But goal setting is very important. You know, many times, even in setting our goals, we set the goals that are very aloof. So those goals have no specificity towards it. And we're not able to properly measure it because we're not going about it the right way. So, the first thing I'd like to point out is that as executives, as professionals, as we go about doing development and personal growth, and then even for our staff, I think something that's very important is something I've always done with my staff, and of course, being a very young person in key leadership positions, over my work experience, it has taught me a lot that young persons, and this is something I think many of my peers and colleagues could learn, is that when you have new employees, many of them will just get molded into the culture. Most people will become what the culture promotes. That already says you need to come in, you need to be able to set goals immediately, or goals will be set for you immediately. Those are things that will help to mold or decide many times beforehand whether this organization is either inhibiting or promoting and facilitating the growth and development of its workers. And one of the things that I've done at the beginning of every year, I sit down with primarily my very young staff, and I ask them not just what they want to do in the organization, but also from a personal lens. And then we try to see how we can marry the two together. I know this is not a Government of Guyana forum, but one of the things that we have here is something called the Government Online Academy of Learning program, which is a scholarship program where the Government of Guyana has given bachelor's, master's, and PhD level scholarships, online scholarships to over 20,000 Guyanese at this moment in time. So those are things that we're able to, me as a professional and in leadership positions, speak to my staff and say, these are some of the programs available. How do you see yourself being able to be developed, as well as the organization able to grow as you are able to attain these things? In goal setting, I think one thing we need to be able to do as leaders is to be able to accept the full truth from our staff. And I'll give you an example. One of the first places that I worked was at the Audit Office of Guyana, That is our audit arm that audits all of the government agencies. And when they called me for the interview, they basically told me, firstly, that yes, you got the job. We just want to identify the person and have more or less a very liberal and open chat with them. And they said to me that they want me to be honest in everything that I said. And I was happy that they said that. So one of the questions they asked was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You know, a question that is very pertinent and related to growth, a question that is related to how do you set your goals? And I said to them, I don't see myself at the audit office in 5 years. So easily they could have said to me, this is someone who might not be the right fit for my organization. But there are many times persons who are in the organization who have goals, and their goals might be outgrowing the organization. But during their tenureship, they want to grow with the organization, and they will contribute many times, and this is something we need to understand, many times more than the persons who have no goals, but just want to proverbially go with the flow. So it's something we need to understand very critically and accept that when people tell us the truth, we can handle the truth. I'll tell you that I went on within my 3rd year at the audit office to win an award for outstanding contribution for financial audits. So it's not the case that I knew that I wanted to move on from the audit office, or that wasn't my full career intention. But it's the case that wherever you are, and that is tied to your own discipline, you were able to properly set goals within the organization, set goals for yourself, and how those can be married together to support one and the same. So goal setting is very, very important. I always can use the example of just going in your car and driving anywhere. You can run out of gas if you don't know where you're going. And in life, we could run out of time. We could run out of energy. Our vehicles could become overrun, and that is our bodies. So if we don't actually know where we're going, and then if we don't stop to service our vehicles for ourselves, the presenter before me talked about it, if we don't stop to rest, if we don't stop to recharge, if we don't stop to refuel in our life's journey, and as we go about our different goals, we're also doing ourselves a disservice. I'd like to maybe contend some of what was said before, because I like to look at the analogy of work-life balance a little different. And from my perspective, I believe that anything that is balanced, and this is math, anything that is balanced doesn't necessarily move. So if you have a scale and it's balanced, there is no movement between anything of the sort. And Lara did correctly alluded, there are some times and in some cases, we need to do more of one or the other. But in that balance, we need to know when to do more of work and when to do more of our relaxation so that we can advance things from time to time. It's not the case that we must always stay stagnant, because that can actually inhibit some of our growth. I'm currently doing a second master's program, but if you don't find the energy to do it, you don't find the time to do it, and you want to remain at the status quo ante, you never are able to grow in that particular aspect. So there are sometimes you need to put more in of one, less of the other, without impairing any aspect of your life. And that is the delicate balance that you actually need to find. So the first thing I want to talk to us about is goal setting, which is, I believe, very, 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 very important. Secondly, and I think it's something we talk to people about, but not in the context of professional development, but embracing failure. I notice that I'll only use examples of my life because I don't want to talk about my staff. They're not here to defend themselves. So embracing failures and allowing professionals and executives to be able to embrace failures is one of the more sure ways for them to grow. Many people will never do anything because they're afraid of failing. This is in their personal life, and this is also as it relates to professional growth and development. I can recall one time, this is when I was at a different portfolio. I had the task of responding publicly via one of our, well, several of our national newspapers to a very known and prominent gentleman in our country. And I contended at the time that I never received an email. I was the one given the responsibility of responding and handling this particular situation. I contended that I never received a particular email. And then one Sunday I'm in church, and this had to be divine, had to be that God spoke to me or something. And all of a sudden, I opened my phone, and because I had checked my phone before, I checked the entire inbox, I searched his name multiple times, never saw the email. So when I said that in the particular letter, I said it publicly. This particular gentleman, we've written him, and there has been no response to date. So that day, that fateful day at church, I opened my email and I saw the number 2 next to junk mail. And I opened the junk mail. Lo and behold, the gentleman did indeed reply. So now I'm thinking, how do I deal with the situation? Do I even tell my superiors? Could I tell them? Have they embraced me enough? And do we as executives embrace our people enough for them not to want to obfuscate, conceal? Notice I'm not using the word lie. But do all types of things, prevaricate, to ensure that we are unable to ever do those things. But if we actually create an environment where they believe that they can actually speak to us about those things, there is opportunity for immense growth. And I can tell you that I have grown many times over because of a situation like that than I would have if I just read a book on something of the nature. So there are many life experiences linked back to our professional lives that we have to learn and also open up the avenue for persons to embrace failure and embrace challenges. I think many times we run away from it because, of course, many of us run profit-driven operations. We run very competitive firms. We run very tight-necked business models that we don't believe people should have any room for error. But I tell you, when people believe that there's no room for error, they're scared to act. And when people are scared to act, they will not act. And when they do not act, they could never hone, they can never sharpen, and they can never develop any of the skills that they might be learning at business school or learning when they go to these different trade shows or international missions or conferences. People have to be able to actually have the ability to utilize many of the things that they learn. And then thirdly, I want to utilize one of the things that was said before, but I think it could be restated. The power of association is a very real thing. One of the presenters used the word networking, and that is a very pertinent thing. In Guyana, we have a saying that it's not who you know, it's who know you. Right? So you could say you know the Prime Minister, the Vice President, and everybody else, but if you call them and they have no association with you, then you really are not able to benefit from that particular network. So there's a certain power associated with association. And I like the way the presenter before me put it over. There are many associations, whether it's inside your particular core group and outside, that you should be able to connect with. I think it is very useful for us as executives to do something that is called incidental learning. We should be able to amass many different types of learning experiences from many different sectors, so that when the need may arise, we're able to address it. One of the unique challenges I have being Senior Director of Investment at an investment promotion agency at a time where Diana has a lot of expressed interest is that people expect you to know everything. So I will have several delegations at my office to be, and they will ask a whole host of questions. Sometimes they will ask me, you know, how much is the government investing in the construction of roads in a particular region over the next 5 years? I have not been at the Ministry of Public Works to decide how much money will be approved, or the Ministry of Finance to decide how much money will be approved, or anything of that nature. But these are very real questions, and I'm just using an example off the top of my head. There are many real things that we don't know what we are missing, because we're only sometimes learning what we believe covers our scope or our neck of the woods. So in professional development, we need to be able to expand what we put inside that scope. And this is going back to a lot of my project management background. What is in scope and what is out of scope. So we really need to increase the things that are in our scope of learning and decrease the amount of things that are outside of our scope of learning. So many times, for example, as an investment promotion agency, you might think we don't need to learn anything about healthcare, but there's investments in healthcare that people have very nuanced questions they want to learn about. Or you might be in a fast-moving consumable goods and think that's the only sector you need to learn about. But many times you need to learn about all the other stuff. You need to learn about supply chain. You need to learn about technology and AI and a whole host of other things that you might even need to learn about the fashion industry, because many of these things that are incidental types of learning are able to propel us for better decision-making. Good decision-making is not limited to just having an MBA, which is very good, or just having a specific knowledge of a specific thing. I believe when we are open to various experiences and various backgrounds and various thought leaders and practices and models, we are able to actually make stronger and better decisions. So as a recap, the first thing I talked about was goal setting, very, very important. Secondly is embracing challenges and failures and ensuring that the environment that we are in is supportive of that particular feature. There's the power of association. And finally, succession plan. There's something that my dad always says. He says, success without a successor is failure in disguise. So if I, as a Senior Director of Investment, to sadly have to leave this office today and no one can take on the role and run with it in a competent manner, I consider that to be a failure on my part. As any executive, as we pursue our own personal and professional development, we need to ensure that we are also lifting the spirits, the minds, the knowledge, the capability, and the capacity, and to ensure that the persons surrounding us, our team, or our juniors or employees or staff, they're able to rise. A rising tide raises all ships. And like the scripture says too, the rain falls on the just and the unjust too. So if you want to look at it from a biblical perspective, but understanding that our success is not measured in what we have, but in what we're able to do when we're gone as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And we've heard so many brilliant recommendations. I hope we were all taking notes. And we will try to unpack some of it shortly. I just want to remind attendees that you can leave your comments or questions in the chat. Mohini did have a comment. I like the thought suggested, I think it was by Lara, regarding the mental health day. I think she's instituted 1 a quarter for her team, and work from home or any other place of your comfort. Yes, at the beach is also good. But before we go into unpacking some of the contributions, I just wanted to bring it back into the context of regenerative capitalism. And how do we embrace or foster sustainable leadership for our leaders and executives? I mean, a lot has been said about sustainability and sustainable outcomes. Are we there, or do we need to develop or have our executives learn more to develop in this area so that we can achieve these sustainable outcomes? I mean, in the context of ESG, you know, social impact, social equity, we touched on diversity, etc. But how do we develop our leaders and executives to become more effective in this area? Any of the panelists can feel free.
Well, I'll start the ball rolling, if I may. I think it speaks to making the connection for our leaders between the necessity of that and profit. Because, you know, with most things, all of these lovely HR terms, DE&I, ESG, mental health days, all of these lovely things that we know are important to people and people's well-being and people's safety, both psychological, and all of those things lead to productivity, which leads to profit. And I think if you can, I mean, I'm speaking as an HR professional who, and we know the HR professionals have spent the last, 50 years trying to convince the board that investing in people is ultimately absolutely the best thing you can do for your business in terms of profit. And that's the language I think you have to speak. It's the right thing to do for our planet. It's the right thing to do for our people. But very often executives only want to talk about profit. So I think in order to, you're talking about encouraging them to make this change and create cultures and workplaces that are sustainable in terms of the environment as well as the people. I think that's the triple bottom line, is that you have to talk about profit in order to convince them to invest in people and planet. I do think there are some executives who are ahead of the curve and understand that, that we're seeing a lot of social entrepreneurship now. So a lot of firms are starting with the environment in mind, with sustainability in mind, which is fantastic. And then also a lot of young people, if you want to hire young people into your organization, they're going to demand that your organization, as every generation is getting greener and cleaner, and they're going to want to see that from your organization. So if you want to bring young people, new ideas, technology into your firm, you're going to have to show them that you are committed to saving the planet. Unfortunately, we've created such a mess for our youth. As I heard a young environmental scientist tell me the other day, there is no planet B. So, this is what we've got, and we have to commit to saving it. So I think multiple reasons, approaches, but at the end of the day, probably the most convincing argument is that it's good for business.
Definitely. I don't know if anyone has anything else. Please feel free to jump in. This is the section where, it's not structured. You can feel free.
Yeah, I don't mind just adding a few thoughts on that, right? In my presentation, I spoke about the whole movement of profit to purpose, right? And I think the point you're making of ESG has to be shifted from the philanthropical view to the boardroom, because the executives, from a planning perspective, I think our focus is still on the outcome, which is profitability, right? And I think if we can get our corporate strategic planning processes correct, right? Boardroom expectation, and then that is cascaded through leadership across the organization. Because what is happening, we are speaking the right languages operationally, but then the pressures from the board is about delivering the numbers, right? And if you're unable to deliver numbers, naturally it's affecting some of the social philanthropical programs. Now, I think that is where the mindset shift is required, right? That ESG is not a philanthropical concept, right? It is to drive business growth, right? And the principle of sustainability, is not merely from an environmental perspective, but how do you bring agility and adaptability in your business model, right? That you're able to adapt to the changing business circumstances, be it through technology, right? Or changes in business environment due to economic factors, right? So I think it's a multitude of concepts and approaches from an executive perspective. I think from a corporate governance view, Kamla, maybe from a CCGI perspective as well. The boardroom, I think this is where this conversation needs to be initiated, cascaded into programs that are executable operationally. Yes, and I think, if we have that multiplier effect, certainly we can derive the benefits of sustainability, not only from a profitability perspective, but complete shift in the business operating models.
But I think also,
sorry, go ahead, Lara.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with what Asif is saying, but our executives have to walk the talk as well. So it's all very well and good to have all these policies and manuals and training and things in your organization. But then if you're, the classic example is when leaders fly to the World Economic Forum in Davos to talk about the environment, and they're all on private jets. It's just or we're driving everywhere, we're not carpooling, or we're not doing remote work. So one of our, again, my own organization, one of our small ways of making, and we're only a tiny firm, to make a contribution to reducing our carbon footprint is working from home half of the week, so that my staff are not sitting in traffic polluting the environment. Okay, still a couple of days, but not every day. And you've got to walk the talk. You can't have a policy and a statement without
right?
Backing it up by action. Yeah. So, you're saying we want to protect the planet, but you're making everybody work in office 5 days a week and spend a month a year in traffic? The research showed. So I think those little things sometimes, executives need to do to show that they're serious about sustainability.
Yeah, I heard the panelist saying that, we have a long way to go in another panel with respect to sustainability. And I think it would start with educating. I think what Asif was saying as well, it starts with educating your board, because it has to be driven from the top down. If your board is not convinced that ESG is important and is necessary to do business, you're not going to make a profit any longer if you don't have sustainable practices baked into your business model. So it's no longer nice to have, but it is, it's imperative that we get on board. And I think training and development at the top levels, including the board and executives, is critical in this regard.
And I think there was a panel who talked about it earlier, but again, when you're building your board, recruiting directors for whom this is a priority, including it, and I've been talking about this earlier today as well, as part of your talent screening, whether it's at entry level or board level, bringing people into your organization for whom sustainability is a priority in whatever way it's relevant, so that you're not, because training, teaching old dogs new tricks can be tricky, but teach, and we've got a lot of old dogs on boards. So we need young, fresh dogs on board.
That comes in, right?
The environment, yeah.
With different perspectives. The new generation, as Lara said, they're not going to work for you if you don't have sustainable practices baked in. I see it with my younger employees, staff members, and so on. They have a whole different perspective on employment and retention, what they're interested in. It's no longer the paycheck. It's a lot of things. Remote work, what are the values of the company? What is the purpose of this organization in the wider context of the planet? So I think executives really have to be developed and try to improve themselves on this level. And we have a ways.
Yeah.
So
what I've been observing, I think Lara mentioned some of the metrics, more and more organizations are quantifying those, right? So, you know, spending 2 hours in traffic in morning, what impact is that having on mental wellness, right? Should that be, I can spend 15 minutes, go and drop my kids and come back, and I'm by 7:30, I'm already on the laptop, right? Versus reaching to work for 9, 15, 20 minutes coffee. By the time I start working is at 9:45. Yes. So how do you quantify that? But I just want to be a devil's advocate here, right? In terms of ESG and diversity and inclusion and the metric. Now, I've also experienced some organization putting that as key performance indicators for your CEO and your market head and so forth. Now, I've seen it work both ways, right? So you want diversity in terms of gender, in terms of color, etc. Now, after some time, what that has resulted in that you don't get the right competence, right? And Lara may want to just chime in on that because
yeah, I'm
you
going to
go
mute
for one-
myself. Hang on, I'm going to mute myself.
you go for one end of the diversity, inclusion, etc. Right? In terms of color, gender, etc. But then competency is compromised, right? So I thought you just put that out there for purpose of discussion.
I think, and it's,
Yeah,
well, I'm not going to spend long. I know we don't have much time, but obviously there's lots of conversations around diversity of boards. You know, gender, there are some boards like the AmCham in Trinidad had, you know, very clearly stated gender balance goals and equity, and they now have achieved equity in terms of gender on their board. But I would not, I'm absolutely sure that none of the women on the board or the men on the board lack the competencies that they need on the board. So I agree with you, Asif. I do think you're obviously not doing it for the sake of show, that people have to have the competency. But I also want to posit that the traditional competencies that we look for on the boards may not actually be what future-focused organizations need. So, for example, you may need to bring you know, somebody whose sexual orientation is different from everybody else's, or who's a young person who's got, you know, great ideas for innovation and technology. They're not going to be able to have all of the traditional director competencies, but they're exactly what you need to move your organization forward. So I think we also need to redefine what competencies we want on the board, right? So that then can inform the diversity that we can bring, because we want to move our organizations forward. And my last comment is something that John talked about. Your legacy as a director or a business owner is so important. You know, when my father always used to share a curse, I believe the ancient Romans or the ancient Greeks, when you die, the world will be no better for you having lived. And that scared me. A lot of my philanthropy has been done out of fear of you know, not leaving a legacy. But I think that's so true in organizations as well. I want people to say, she made a difference, she made a positive difference, you know, and that's purpose, and that's sustainability, and that's people, and all of those good things.
Thanks.
So I'm going to stop there.
Kathryna, if I may just interject for a second. One is to say, so we are at the top of the hour, so now we into the last half hour for the Q&A section.